Greetings from the IP communications and VoIP community. We're at vuc.me on the web. This is the VoIP Users Conference every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time. We would like to thank Simwood.com, who can turn you as a developer into a telco. Simwood.com. Our hosted PBX is on onsip.com. Web hosting for the VUC is provided by Bluehost.com. And a couple of other .coms that help us with support. ZipDX.com, our full-featured, full-colored conference bridge. And our local rate dial-ins provided by Voxbone.com. Thanks to all those who support us, including those of you who listen and participate.
And with that, this is VUC number 495 for June 17th, 27th. What am I saying? 2014. I'm a little confused today. This is Michael Graves. I'm sitting in for Randy, our esteemed founder, who is on the other side of the planet this week, taking a much-deserved day or two off with his missus. And we have today Peter Dunkley from Acision to take us through a potentially dangerous demo. Now, for the purposes of one little bit of housekeeping, my apologies, the YouTube stream is not on the front page of the VoIP Users Conference blog site today. Attempted to do it, but because of a change in IP address, I find myself locked out. So, but you can get to it through our VoIP Users Conference YouTube channel, also on G+. And of course on ZipDX live audio, and there's an MP3 feed as well. So let me take this off of me. Peter, welcome.
Hi, Michael.
Thank you for coming to join us. And you've got to bear with me a moment. I'm not a software developer, so I need to back out and deal with this from a 30,000-foot level, and then we can dive into the nitty-gritty details. So, Acision. What does Acision do? Who are you? And I gather you come to be there through the acquisition of Crocodile, but let us know. Okay. Just fill us in.
Well, okay. I mean, Acision is probably one of the biggest companies a lot of people here have never heard of. Acision can trace its roots all the way back to the late 1980s to an Irish company called Altiscon, and they were involved in the the invention of effectively SMS as a person-to-person technology, and in fact deployed the first consumer SMS. I think it was to a Scandinavian operator, I can't remember quite which one, back in the early 90s. Now, then there were a whole series of acquisitions involving Logica and CMG, and Logica and CMG merging, and sort of throughout the 2000s or the early to mid 2000s, Logica CMG would have been kind of the guerrilla company in terms of messaging. You know, the vast majority of operators bought their SMSCs from this company, and then Logica and CMG, as you know, great big consultancy firms. Acision was spun out of them back into being a messaging company. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but it's something like 45% of SMSs, short messages sent today in the world, go through Acision's equipment. But historically, it's been a core network carrier vendor selling into that specific part of the carrier network. So although it's a very important part of the network, and you know, almost certainly anytime you send an SMS, given that there's pretty good odds it's going through Acision's equipment, most people, even a lot of people inside carriers, haven't necessarily heard of them. Now, Acision is, as part of what it's doing, it's still got the carrier business. It's very important, and that's continuing. But they're also venturing out into new areas, and that includes providing services to enterprises. And that includes things like providing rich messaging services to enterprises, and SMS breakout and aggregator type services, but also through the acquisition of technology from Crocodile, moving into providing other forms of communication as well, such as real-time media and things through WebRTC.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that helps us to understand. So very much behind the scenes, but integral to carrier operations generally.
Yes, I mean anybody who's out there who's done any sort of SMS work will have probably used SMPP, which is a protocol for the short message peering protocol. Is an IP protocol for sending short messages between servers and the network, and for peering between the peering between networks as well. A lot of the time in North America, and that's an Acision protocol. So. Not just providing the equipment, but an awful lot of the specifications and the protocols and things that are used out there come from, for this kind of technology, come from Acision.
Excellent. And so what's this new thing, and how does it differ from the old thing?
So about a year ago, I came onto the VUC, just over a year ago, maybe 13 months, and I talked about the Crocodile SDK that we launched. Which was a WebRTC SDK supporting voice and video presence and messaging with some basic network address book support in JavaScript. What we've been working on recently, or I've been working on recently, is the Acision SDK, and the Acision SDK has taken the Crocodile SDK to a whole new level. We've learned some very important lessons to do with messaging, presence, contact management and things, and actually significantly re-implemented those, as well as continuing to provide the voice and video technology. And in addition, while before it was just a JavaScript application, JavaScript library, we now have libraries for iOS and Android, so you can write your native applications, native WebRTC applications, and messaging applications, and so on, for those platforms, and interoperate your applications between them.
Wow. Okay. Can we have an example of how that would work, or
Okay, so one of the use cases which we did a demo for, and it's only one use case, the SDK is very flexible, would be a contact center use case. So the demo that we won the award for last week in Atlanta, we integrated our JavaScript SDK into Salesforce using Visualforce in order to make it possible for somebody who has a native mobile app from a company that could be something like Argos in the UK or Best Buy in the US, as well as just being able to see items they purchase and stuff, can actually communicate in real time with audio and video through to somebody in the contact center. We've done that integration together, and in a little while I'll run that demo for you. And what the SDK does is, because you can put the SDK into the mobile application and into the web, you can tie those two together, and you can build something like this off of a single platform that we provide.
Interesting. It's all new. It's all greenfield for me.
Yeah.
Not being a developer.
Okay. Well, maybe I should actually try the demo. I can actually try running the demo now, if that might help. Okay. So right, bear with me on this, because I'm doing some relatively complicated screen sharing here, and it worked for me exactly once and hasn't really worked properly since, so I may resort to holding a phone up in front of the screen. I'm going to try it this way first. Okay, so can you see that? Is that coming up okay?
Yes, indeed.
That's very clear. You're very clever, Peter.
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start by logging into so if I log into Salesforce here, and I go to the agent screen, what you can see is a blank screen. There's nothing here, but as you can see, there's an area for previously purchased items, the item that current item, related items, and customer details. But of course, this doesn't get filled in till a call comes in. Now, one of the important things when you've got a video call center, it's important for the agent to look their best. So we have the ability to turn on and off local video. So if I were working in a call center, as John has said on a number of occasions, I could tidy up my hair and put on my lipstick and other bits and pieces in order to make sure I look pretty for whoever's calling in. And then we have an application which has been modeled on a well-known US store application, but it isn't one. We've called it Engage. And here's the application. So I'm coming in here and I'm going to sign in. Now, in the best Apple tradition, this is a demo application, so some sequences have been shortened. I'm not going to go through the whole login process here. And this is showing products that I've previously purchased. Now, I'm having a problem with my Samsung TV. So I can go to the Samsung TV. This tells me when I bought it and other information about it. But at the top here, I can click to talk to the call center operator. And as you can see, we have a video call coming in. And and as expected, the WebRTC has unfortunately caused the phone to go away. So I'll switch back to the camera and hold it up in a minute. So what you can see here is my customer details, my purchase history, what page I'm currently on in the app, as well as some related products. So, you know, I could be saying I'm currently trying to watch something on the TV, but it's all a bit blurred. And the person can go, are you watching something in 3D? Do you have 3D glasses? And I go, well, no, I don't. Do I need them? And the person can say, well, yes, you do, and here are the ones I recommend for you. And they can come down to here and click on this Push Related Products button. So I'm going to switch the screen sharing off for a second. So if you see on the phone here, there's a video call up. If I click on that Push Related Products button,
there we go.
The product gets pushed to the application. So now I can talk to the person about it. They're actually helping me. They're solving my problem by saying, not only do you need to buy A, but this is the one I recommend. Now I say, okay, that's great, I'll have those. And before I go, the person can say, oh, well, we have a special deal on a Fitbit Flex. How about one of those? And push that to me. Which one I can go, no, I don't want it. And they'll say, okay, we'll go back to the glasses. Okay, I'm happy, I'm going to check out. So now the call center operator disconnects, and I can go through the process here and go to sort of buy now, and away we go. Now, the reason that this is important is that a lot of people have been talking about WebRTC in the call center. Now, you can use WebRTC in the call center in order to reduce the cost if it's just a plain voice call center and things. But if you're wanting to introduce something a bit more interesting, a lot of people are talking about video. But the problem with video is that all that video in the call center really does is increase the cost of actually running the call center. You probably have to pay people more, you know, it's a more complicated system. But with video, it becomes more like that relationship you have when you go into the store. You know, 10, 15 years ago, if you'd had a problem with your TV, you wouldn't go on the internet looking for help. You would go to the shop you actually physically bought it from. You would talk to an expert. With this WebRTC video here, you know, I'm having a problem with my TV. I can hold the camera up and say, look, this is my TV, this is my Blu-ray player. And the expert on the end can say, well, what you really need is an HDMI cable. You didn't buy one. So, you know, so what this can do is this can improve customer service. And by allowing the operator to push things back, it gives the opportunity to upsell, suggest accessories and things that they need. So it's a way for a business, when they're using something like WebRTC, to actually have their customers use WebRTC without them even knowing that's what they're using, but in a way that can actually increase revenue for the business. It can improve customer satisfaction rather than just, you know, being a cool technology for its own sake. So that's one example of what you can do with our SDK.
So it's a way of bringing a more high touch and sort of, a more personalized relationship management into that retail space.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I see James Bodie is with us, and you're in the mobile space, James. What do you think? Is this going to it's like a tool set for adding Mayday functionality to any mobile app.
Yeah, it's a pretty good demo. Yeah, pretty good demo. I was very impressed with that. Sadly, I didn't make it to WebRTC to see that, but I can understand why you won there. Are you using the data channel there to push the product information?
No, not at the moment. To be honest, the data channel isn't quite ready. It's good. It's going to be great, but it's not quite ready. So at Acision, as a messaging company, we have a lot of messaging infrastructure, and what we're doing here is we're using messaging in an application-to-application way. So it's basically bouncing through WebSockets off of one of the servers in our network.
Yeah, I wondered how you were doing that because the end result looks pretty good, pretty seamless. But I guessed you were probably cheating behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, in Google Chrome, they fundamentally changed how data channel works there. It's never really interoperated between Chrome and Firefox, and actually, if you're using the Google Media Engine for WebRTC, data channel isn't available on iOS, which I'm using there. Data channel is great. It's going to be really important here. But actually, there's a lot to be said for routing a lot of this stuff through the network right now. And even in the future, one of the advantages of routing it through the network in the future is that if it's going through the network, you have the option of logging it. You simply don't get that with the data channel. And for diagnostic purposes, it might be very useful to do that. This is one of the things that I find really interesting is historically a lot of messaging has been person to person, and we've also seen an awful lot of application to person. Everybody's familiar when you these days when you've got a courier bringing a parcel, getting an SMS alert or a reminder from your dentist that it's time for you to go for your checkup tomorrow. But actually, there's a whole sequence of application to application, and I don't mean machine to machine. We're not talking necessarily about Internet of Things, but as a data back channel to supplement the voice and to bring richer features into the application. There's going to be a lot of this application to application messaging, and some of it's going to be over the data channel, but there's still going to be a place for routing it through the network. We will support the data channel when it's ready, but in the meantime.
Yeah, and that's going to be exciting when it arrives. But going back to your demo, how far off do you think you are from having something that could be deployed in a live customer services type scenario? Just demoed.
What we're providing is the SDK. So we're not really an expert in the customer services area at all. So we're providing the underlying infrastructure, and it actually didn't take a long time to get that demo written once we had the underlying platform. But getting that underlying platform built, that was a lot of work, and getting the SDK built, that was a lot of work. So the SDK is going to be generally available from the end of July, 1st of August. Basically, that's going to be generally available for people to take and use, or people to buy, sorry, and use. And we're happy to work with.
Who are the people you're talking about? Who's the target market for this?
Pretty much anyone who's got a good WebRTC use case. I mean, we're not having self-provisioning. We're not really going after the 1-2 man band developer teams who just want to try something out. But if you have a real use case and a real business case, we're interested in talking to you. And we have effectively 3 deployment models. So the system's deployed in Amazon AWS. People can use it as software as a service. We give them an API key, and away they go. They can start using it. Option number 2, which we're talking to some customers about who themselves use Amazon, is to deploy our back end into their own VPC. And option number 3 is that using Eucalyptus, which is an Amazon-compatible virtualization environment, we can also put this in somebody's own data center. Now, there's going to be a variety of different use cases. There are certain things like healthcare and finance. Actually, healthcare is not so bad. Amazon is HIPAA certified now. But finance, for example, banks will insist on having it in their own data centers, regardless of how much traffic's going through it. For ordinary people who don't have those security requirements, I would suggest that given the integration effort, the cost of running the network and other bits and pieces, it actually makes sense to use our platform as a service, unless you're talking about having really huge levels of traffic or have specific regulatory issues. But basically, we can support that whole range.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about the Acision platform and why that's good.
Well, the Acision platform is, well, for a start, for the WebRTC session establishment, we're using Kama Elio. No surprise there, given my background. And James, come on, all the best networks are built on Kama Elio, right?
They are indeed, yes.
Including yours. So, there's basically, we've used what we think is the right combination of blue sky new developments for parts that aren't working out there already, as well as tried and tested. There's a lot of people saying, no, you shouldn't be using SIP in WebRTC. And you know what? It's not perfect and it's not ideal for all use cases, but nobody has actually come up with a working alternative yet. And I remember towards the end of last year being at on a panel talking about signaling options for WebRTC, and there was a guy up there promoting the fact that you should do your own. And he said, but you need to be aware of session timeouts, you need to be aware of this edge case, that edge case, the next edge case. And actually using SIP and using a well-established library fixes that problem. For messaging and presence, we've gone out of our way to try and be optimal for mobile, but also flexible for real time. So our messaging protocol, you can use both over REST, HTTP post messages and back, and you can also use it asynchronously with WebSockets. Now what that means is that if you're in an application doing a chat, or if you need the kind of background real-time communication that we had in that demo app, you open a WebSocket and it's asynchronous. But when you background your app, you can actually close down the WebSocket. And that means you're not maintaining that connection, you're not using the bandwidth, you're not draining the battery. But what you can do is you can use the REST API to register for a push notification, which means that if somebody sends you a message in a non-real-time way, you'll get an Apple push notification through or an Android push notification through. You can click on that notification, open the application, WebSocket connection gets recreated, and any pending messages get streamed to you, so you get the best of both worlds. In terms of presence, I've spent an awful lot of time on presence, on SIP presence and XMPP presence, and SIP presence isn't great because of the way it works, where you have to have a central point in the network that you route everything through that processes all the traffic. It will really kill your network core, whether it's an ordinary SIP proxy or an IMS core. XMPP is better because it goes direct from client to network, but at the end of the day it's a connection-based protocol, and that is not ideal for a mobile device. So we are using a REST-based presence protocol that allows you to do basically pushing and pulling of information on demand. And what that means is that with the REST protocol, you can say, for group of people A, I want to see only their online and offline status, give me it now. And then you can make your application ask for it when it wants it, to keep itself up to date. But similar to the messaging, we have a WebSocket-based version of it as well that is asynchronous. So you can actually use both, you can use a bit of each, you can come and go. It's up to the application developer to select the technology that's right for them. And of course, if you're doing a web app, there's no disadvantage to using WebSockets because they're not really backgroundable anyway, so you may as well just have use the asynchronicity there. The other thing that's different about what we've done is our authentication. We don't actually provision users and usernames and passwords onto our network. What we do is we have an authentication subsystem. Every application on our network has its own API key. And the first thing that it does when you start up our library is it connects to this authentication subsystem. And this authentication subsystem goes, for this API key, the authentication mechanism is X. And our identities and authentication are delegated elsewhere. That can be OAuth to Salesforce, or to Facebook, or to LinkedIn, or to somebody's own proprietary database. And effectively, we go and we query this external thing to find out whether you're allowed onto the network or not. If this thing says yes, our authentication subsystem generates some credentials for each of the network services you're allowed. It's different credentials for messaging, for presence, and for voice and video. So you only get credentials for the part you're allowed, and it provides those credentials along with the host name for each of those services.
Okay. Have you actually got that authentication mechanism working and demonstrable?
You saw it.
Well,
I logged into Salesforce.
Well, I saw a little tiny bit of things, but it's a demonstration, and you're never quite sure how much is real live Salesforce and how much is smoke and mirrors in these demos. But knowing you, Peter,
inevitably, in any demo, there's a bit of smoke and mirrors, but there's a minimum of smoke and mirrors there. It's there and it works. We can't connect to any OAuth 2 provider because you get a whole list of fields back when you authenticate with OAuth 2. So for every OAuth 2 provider, we have to do some tweaking. There are different host names, the different bit here. We get this whole page of data back, and we have to pick which field we actually use as an identity and other bits and pieces. So every new OAuth thing we add in requires a small amount of development work, but it's in there. But what the authentication here means, though, is that you can then use the usernames, passwords. So you don't need usernames and passwords to access the other parts of the network. Those credentials provided back by the authentication system contain information on your username, which means that it's not possible for you to spoof your username. They're short-lived. I think 15 minutes is our default, at which point the SDK has to go and ask for new ones, which reduces the chance of somebody actually stealing them and reusing them, which isn't something we're overly worried about anyway, because all communication between the library and the network is encrypted. So
okay, have you packaged all of this up in your library? Is it there to use? It is.
Yes, it is.
Well, Peter, I'm going to be in there on the train on the way home, because that answers some questions, some little issues that I've been experiencing.
So the other benefit, which was a side benefit, I didn't think of it at the time, but it's proved to be very useful, is that when you're doing this kind of authentication, of course, you take those credentials and you include them on the HTTP URI when you send your message in for your REST message or in your WebSocket Connect. And that means that you don't have post 401 for digest authentication post 200. You get post 200 OK, which actually means that, especially for something like Presence, which uses a lot of traffic, half the number of messages potentially.
Yeah,
which is not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing at all, and particularly important if you're operating in a mobile environment or something like that, where you just don't want chatty protocols going all the time. Yeah.
So basically, So there's a question actually come in on the IRC asking about XMPP for WebRTC signaling. We don't support that at the moment. Because of the way our SDK is written, you are kind of quite arm's length away from the underlying signaling. So we have the option in the future of adding XMPP or OpenPeer or whatever else as and when we need it. And of course we have the option, because of the way the authentication in Bootstrap works, of saying application 1 uses SIP, application 2 uses XMPP, because it will forward people onto different parts of the network. But to be honest, at the moment, SIP does what we need.
Yeah. So Whitebook is now asking, what if somebody gets your credentials in that 15-minute? Well, and could it be spoofed by another user? But that is not a trivial thing to undertake, grabbing somebody's confidentials, because they're encrypted anyway, aren't they?
Yes, that's the point. There is no unencrypted communication between the mobile device and the network. So from a mobile point of view, I suppose, if you're talking about a native mobile application, you would pretty much have to have some sort of debugger connected and be looking at what's going in and out in order to do that. Now, that's not really a vulnerability, because your ordinary user isn't sitting there with the debugger connected. On the JavaScript one, it's a bit more possible, but you still got to go into the Chrome console. You've got to work out where in our minimized library this information is, and you've got to look it up at the right time and copy it out. And I suppose it's theoretically possible somebody can put something on there that will do this. Can't infect your computer in such a way that it will do this, but if they can infect your computer to the level that that's going to happen, frankly, your bank password and everything else you enter into your web browser is also gone. So absolutely. I don't believe it opens up any if you have a situation on your device or your computer where you're vulnerable to this, frankly, somebody already owns it and is looking at everything you have anyway. And like I said, by keeping the time window down to 15 minutes, seriously, they would have to get in, take it, and they would have to use it within that 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
And we could turn it down to 5 minutes or even 1 minute if we really wanted to. We thought 15 minutes was kind of a gut feeling was a safe number.
And did you see the response from Whitebook? Fair enough, he says.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, that was an answer and a half. This is quite good. You're just in super form, Peter.
Yeah. So if there's any, I'm happy to. I can't give away the secret sauce here, but what I can do is answer sort of general technology questions. I've given an outline of how the security and things work because it's important for people to know that that's safe, and I've tried to explain the advantages of our network in terms of because of the way the bootstrap works. Incidentally, that means we can upgrade the network. We're always going to try and make our API backwards compatible. But should we go to a new version and have to break backwards compatibility, that's fine, because for each user of our network, on an API key by API key basis, we can mark whether they've upgraded their application or not. And because the authentication server provides the host names to connect to back, actually what that means is that we can actually in the future deploy multiple versions of our network in parallel.
All right. Well, can I now ask the obvious question that lots of people are probably dying to ask, and that is, what's the licensing model or the business model behind this? How do Acision make money out of this?
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to be a little bit vague here. We effectively sell access to the service, and we have a number of different models based on what people's use cases are. And we have a number of different pricing levels based on what people's use cases are. So the best thing to do is, if you're interested in actually using this, is to get in touch with me, and I will forward the contacts on to the appropriate account manager who can discuss those details with someone and come back and say, well, for you, we price this way.
So it goes on to normal Acision pricing rules, where the salesperson fires up his random number generator. No, I didn't mean that.
It's a complicated one because for example, if we're sending IP messages backwards and forwards, that costs a certain amount to deliver. But because of the Acision stuff we have in there, we can also do fallback to SMS through this. But of course, delivering SMSs is disproportionately expensive because of what operators, I'm not sure what Truephone charge, but operators in general charge an awful lot of money for that. And therefore actually that results, so it really comes down to the use case. I want to use SMS, I don't want to use SMS. I expect to have this many users, I expect to have this many users doing this different thing, I just want to use voice, actually I want video. We're debating new features to go in the next version of the network. There's a whole debate on what the features are, but there could well be things like recording and other things going into here in the future. That, of course, costs more to provide than an ordinary call. So it's a case of.
We certainly like recording. It's one of our largest revenue generators at the moment.
Well, recording's interesting. There's a lot of people out there talking about doing recording, and my view is that if you're going to do it, you have to do it right. And that means that actually there are two areas of recording. There's metadata logging, and there's actually recording.
Yeah, and if
you have to have them separate.
A very big part of it, from our point of view, is doing it in a compliant way, so that if you're producing it as evidence, there must be absolutely no doubt that it hasn't been tampered with in any way.
Indeed.
And that is tricky and can be quite expensive.
Indeed, but the other aspects that we're looking at when we're talking about recording is, okay, we can record audio and voice, but you know what? We also, if somebody's recording that, we need to make sure everything's being recorded. If audio and voice are being recorded, we better make sure we're recording all the messages they send at the same time, because otherwise there might be a back channel. And now we have presence. You know what? We'd better record all the presence at the same time too, because somebody might work out that when they change their mood to buy this stock now, that doesn't get logged. So actually, when people talk about recording, it is a much bigger problem than people think.
It gets very complicated very rapidly. Michael's has just asked, is there a content management aspect to recording? And there certainly is. If you want to be able to recall, go to and find the right recording in amongst the terabytes of recordings that you've, as a company, have managed to scrape together, then clearly you're going to have some kind of content management system on there.
And even more important than being able to find your own data is making sure you can't actually find somebody else's. That's the other part, which is very tricky.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of stuff in there.
And you probably want to have an audit trail on all queries that have been made to the recording database, so you can see who's looked at what and when.
Exactly. So, yeah. So we're talking about all of these kind of things, but in the meantime, what we have is what you've seen there, which we've built that in the last few months. It's a reasonable job.
Well, everything you do is very reasonable, Peter. And the fact that whenever you go quiet, it means that you're beavering away, producing something that takes people's breaths away. But anyway, where should people go to find the links for the Acision SDK?
Okay, well, there's a website which is forge.acision.com, and I will type that into the
IRC.
IRC. What you'll find is you can't actually sign up for anything, but you will get access to the API documentation for JavaScript, iOS, and Android. What we don't have at the moment is some of the higher level elevator pitch style information there. I'm afraid it takes a very deep dive all of a sudden into the technical. The documentation up there describes messaging and WebRTC content management and authentication for iOS and JavaScript, and just messaging contact management and authentication for Android. We have presence over the next few weeks up until we hit the end of July when the launch is, more and more documentation. So documentational presence on everything, documentation on WebRTC on Android will become available.
Okay, so the Acision documentation and the sales crew are kind of trying to keep up to speed with you.
Well, and we're trying to keep up to speed with them. We've reached the point of the project now where we're writing a lot of documentation, which is a very important part of it. But it takes time to complete that. A lot of the code documentation is auto-generated, but it needs a bit of editing before it can go up there. You know what engineers are like, James. Kind of thing that might come out there if you don't keep an eye on it.
Yes, indeed. So
what's a go-to-market strategy on something like this? Is this something that we take to it's not a carrier channel as a value-added thing, or do we take it to a development community and hope that something grows organically out of that, or specific business verticals?
Oh, what was interesting at the WebRTC conference last week was, John, formerly from Crocodile, who's now at Acision as well, himself said that we now feel like we're getting towards the end of the beginning of WebRTC. There's still a lot of cool technological stuff going on, but there's far less of a wow factor coming off the technology, and more people are aware of it and starting to say, how can I apply this? How can I use it? So you've got companies that do conferencing systems. You've got companies that are contact centers, online education, online healthcare. There's a huge number of these verticals which can make use of this technology. But actually, real-time communications is not the forte of any of these people.
Indeed, yeah. It's not an answer in itself. It's only when you embed it into another application that it becomes really useful.
Yeah. But there's a whole range of applications already out there, and there's a whole range of these verticals getting stronger and stronger that have these applications now. So online education, healthcare, online finance, financial advice, that kind of thing, are getting stronger and stronger. But there's already a whole bunch of established players in these markets. So, a firm like us providing software development kit What we're looking to do is we're looking to say to these guys, you know what, we understand real-time communication, we understand networks, we understand scalability and security and resiliency and all these other things. You understand your business, which we don't. So what we need to do is work together. We can provide you with this capability. And we're talking to a variety of people. We're talking to carriers, we're talking to enterprises, because again, there are carriers who are very au fait with SS7 and might even be quite up to date with IMS. But more and more of them need to make sort of OTT plays or add that kind of technology. And what we can do is we can help all of those people.
Okay, and in fact, big operators, MNOs, launching OTT plays seems to be flavour of the month, flavour of the week, because this week we've seen EE announcing their OTT play, which is potentially quite interesting, and the week before we had 3 launching theirs. So, and we've already got the Telefonica O2 thing here in UK. Everybody seems to be at it at the moment, but we're waiting to see how that all pans out, because there are lots of issues there.
But I mean, the message I'm kind of giving is that anybody out there who's watching this, either live or listening in or in the future, if you need these kind of real-time communications capabilities, and I'm talking about presence, I'm talking about messaging, I'm talking about voice and video, that is secure, that is scalable, then come and talk to Acision, get in contact with me, or go to the Forge website and follow the links there and get in contact with somebody at Acision, because we're happy to talk to you about it and discuss what people's needs are, work out what the right deal is for those people if it's something that we're interested in. We're happy to talk. We're happy to see new ideas. I think the most successful WebRTC business is going to be something we've never heard of, and that might even be true for the most successful messaging business. The availability of these SDKs, and I admit there are other people providing them as well, but the availability of them means that the barrier to entry for using these technologies is dropping quickly, and that's going to allow people who've got really bright ideas but previously wouldn't have known how to build them to actually build them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how many applications we're seeing all of a sudden that just have WebRTC embedded in them, and you don't.
Yeah.
Nobody's shouting and making a lot of noise about the fact it's WebRTC. It's just there, and it just works.
And I mean, one of the reasons for coming to Acision is, I think, the richness of our offering. There are a number of companies out there, but we are offering presence, we're offering messaging, and with the messaging, we're offering fallback to SMS. And because of the company's pedigree and background, we have the ability to deliver SMS pretty much everywhere in the world as an aggregator.
Okay.
And also voice and video. Sorry,
I'm being very rude. I'm talking across you. SMS is a known and much loved transport for messaging. But what are Acision doing in the slightly more modern space, where we've got handset-specific push messaging? So iMessage to the to iOS devices, for example, and Hangout message type things on. My brain is not working particularly well this evening, is it?
I can't possibly comment on that, although if somebody did want to implement such an iMessage or Hangout type application, you could do that on top of our SDK, and you could implement it in such a way that if you tried to message somebody who didn't have that capability, it would fall back to SMS in the network.
Indeed. In many instances, all you want to do is to send a message to someone, and you're not particularly bothered whether it goes iMessage or SMS. You just want to send a message as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Well, that's something we can help with, and because of the capability here, we're not just an IP messaging company here. We have the IP messaging and the FB falling back to SMS integrated, which means that you can send a message, and when it gets into the network goes, this person doesn't exist. It can then try and send that message on through another route, which would be SMS. And that that is one of the reasons. I mean, there are many reasons SMS is never going to completely go away, but one of them is that it's this lowest common denominator. You're generally reachable on it. It's only 160 characters. You can't send rich multimedia messages with different fonts and lots of things in it the way that you could if you were doing an all IP solution. But what you can do is you can make sure that at least it gets there.
Yes, and you can get it delivered to a £5 pay-as-you-go, really cheap, nasty 2G phone, and it's going to get there.
Exactly. So that's the other message is that not just through our SDK but through other routes as well. At Acision we have a tremendous SMS delivery capability. So if you're an enterprise or somebody else who actually needs to be delivering SMSs to people, Acision might not be something you've ever thought of, but come and talk to us. Our equipment's installed in so many networks around the world, and we've also got so many relationships with people that actually we probably have one of the most comprehensive SMS aggregation capabilities of anyone.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I'm keen to find out a little bit more about Acision's capability in the blue bubble area as opposed to the green bubble area, to use an Apple-esque term.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is something, of course, be happy to talk to you about, James. I'm sure we can arrange for the appropriate Acision salespeople to get in touch.
Indeed. Well, anyway, we don't want to talk about that. Have we got any other questions? Come on, Michael. Have we got Carl lurking there somewhere?
Actually, Carl has nipped out, but we do have 15 on the on ZipDX, including Andy Smith has joined. So anybody on ZipDX, *6 to unmute yourself. Feel free to step up and pose your questions. Honestly, a lot of this stuff is WebRTC is making me want to dip my toe into JavaScript development, which is something I've managed to steer clear of this far in my career. But it's making me want to roll up my sleeves and actually get a little dirty again.
Well, at one stage we were going to do something really quite amazing with the VUC using WebRTC, and then we've kind of wound back from that.
I'm sure one day we'll all be on Jitsi Video Bridge instead of Google Hangouts.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I just like to be much more deterministic about control of the infrastructure.
Or even both.
Thing.
Yeah, in true VUC form, we could have both Google Hangouts and Jitsi Video Bridge interoperating together, just in the way that we've got Skype and going into ZipDX with, well, all kinds of multimedia things. I mean, the wonderful thing about VUC is it uses everything and anything it can get its hands on.
Yeah, we believe in glue. We believe in lots and lots and lots of glue.
Yeah.
And that's true. So come on, folks. ZipDX, I see Fred is there. Andy, you're unmuted. Fire away, sir.
Well, good afternoon. I've not been able to see any of this, but I've managed to watch a few of Peter's demos, so I'm fairly certain I would have seen it go through and do clever things without actually appearing to do clever things. But my question for Peter at the moment is, having achieved what you've achieved so far and got this through with SMSs all over the place and connecting everything together, where next?
Well, we actually are in discussions about the next version, and I can't go into a lot of detail. I mean, I mentioned obvious features like recording. Whether or not they actually become a feature we do or not is something that we're discussing. But it's all of the same. We at the moment have, I think, the richest platform out there, because there are people who do very good voice but they don't do video or presence. There are people who do voice and they do messaging, but it's effectively just SMS messaging, whereas we can do rich IP messaging and SMS messaging. The presence stuff we've got in there is not a lot of people have that, but there are still things out there that are needed. That are common features in a lot of SDKs that we don't quite have yet, and we will keep on building, we will keep on adding to it, albeit prioritized based on customer demand, of course. But the idea is more of the same, making the platform richer and adding more and more options, and opening it, thereby opening up the capabilities to a wider set of developers and enterprises.
Yes, on the subject of opening it up to a wider set of developers, Acision going to be attending the TADS Summit, in Istanbul on the 12th to 13th of November?
I don't believe I will be. I don't know about Acision as a whole. I've actually been asked to chair a WebRTC conference at the beginning of November, and in San Francisco. So I probably won't be back in time to do that. And if we, there's a whole bunch of other WebRTC events and other things going on there. So I don't think I'll be at it. Whether somebody else from Acision will be at it or not, I don't know.
It would be good to see somebody from Acision there, because it's clear that the SDK is very rich, and there are a whole raft of people who would be very interested in finding out more about it. And a lot of them will be at TAD Summit.
I mean, one other option, of course, would be for somebody who's going to TAD Summit who actually needs these capabilities. We'd be more than happy if they've got a good business model for them to use our SDK as well.
Well, I think we could well be doing that. But is it worthwhile, very quickly, Peter, going through your diary and explaining where you're likely to be over the next 3 to 4 months, just in case people want to get to you?
Okay, well, the week after next, I'm going to be in New York at DevCon 5, which is the HTML5 and Mobile App Developers Summit. I've done the...
What are the dates for that?
Let me just pull that up. Give me one moment.
Over the States around then, and it would be good to drop in, even though Mrs. B may not be particularly happy about it.
Well, if she's unhappy with you when you're far away, that's probably better than when she's unhappy with you at home.
I get away with it because generally I can make her laugh. If I can make her laugh, I can get away with murder.
Well, that's the 9th and 10th of July in New York. Now, there's actually going to be a number of people talking about WebRTC at that event. The last two, I was really the only person there speaking about it, but there's now going to be a group of people, I think, that are going to be there. So that could be very interesting, and there might even be some interesting panel discussions.
Like Tim Panton, by any chance?
I'm not sure exactly who's there. If you go to www.htmlreport.com and then select the DevCon 5 link, I'll put that in as well. I think it's html5report.com. Yeah, you can so see who's going to be there. Although I believe the agenda might be fluctuating a little bit, in that there might be even more people there. I may or may not be traveling in August. I honestly don't know yet, but it's not likely that I'll be at any conferences then.
So not doing ClueCon in the first week in August in Chicago?
No, I kind of, occasionally need to stay at home.
Oh.
And probably at the moment September is looking very quiet, but I am hoping to go to AstraCon in October. I'm currently looking to get internal sign-off for that. But David,
I think we'll certainly be there, and hopefully VUC will be there too.
Not in the form of Randy.
No.
I might make the trip myself in that case.
Yes, Michael's this time.
Yeah, and then in the first week of November, there is the WebRTC Summit, which I am the chair of the WebRTC track.
Oh, that's London, that one?
That's in Santa Clara, the Santa Clara Convention Center.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks after that, it will be WebRTC Conference and Expo 5, and I don't know whether Acision's doing that one or not yet. So, but that is somewhere where I might be.
Okay.
There's a task in Johnny Apple seeding all of this, isn't it now? Because the technology has reached a point where it needs to get out to people who can start to formulate specific solutions to real problems, and we're not debating protocols and things anymore. We're actually starting to solve real business problems for people.
No, and that's starting to happen. The very first WebRTC Conference and Expo, it was a bunch of vendors, and the second one there was a few more sort of customer type people trying to learn, and then third one, and the fourth one was even more so, and I suspect that the fifth one in November will have an even better proportion of sort of users to technology providers, and that's the whole thing of us being sort of towards the end of the beginning of this now. Even when you go to the conferences, there are more users there, and so even the HTML5 and Mobile App Developers Conference, DevCon 5, is really interesting, and I recommend anyone who can be around at the time to go. I actually have a discount code I can share as well for 50% off.
We like discount codes.
Which I will tweet about if anybody's following me on Twitter after this.
I should like to point out that ONSIP is one of the leading sponsors for that event, as well as one of our sponsors.
Yeah, and John will be. Yeah, I was talking to John at the last week, and he'll be there too. So it's going to be an interesting group of people, because at previous DevCon 5s, as I said, I was the only person talking about it. But now there's going to be more people talking about WebRTC. And what's interesting about that conference is these web app developers, these mobile app developers, are not telecoms people, and they are the people who should be using this technology. So, you know, the effort towards educating the people who if WebRTC is successful, are the people who are going to be using it the most and doing the most with it, has begun to gather momentum, which is a good sign.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not just people talking about it. And all of a sudden it went quiet.
Yeah, we had Google had indigestion there for a moment, but we're back.
Right.
Well, we've run it rounding up to an hour. I'll ask for anybody who's on ZipDX to unmute and offer forth their wisdom, questions, and commentary. It's educational for me because I come to this from an end user perspective. So I'm curious to know, why is it that I'm in the Costco app and the Costco app is not as helpful as it could be on my tablet? And it's, well, because they haven't yet deployed anything that engages me in this direct kind of a fashion. Maybe the Costco app isn't the best example. It could be the Wells Fargo app that is what I really want to be using, because I really would like to have a better way of interfacing with my bank so that I don't despise them quite as much as I do.
I think banks are going to be huge users of this, but banks are often quite conservative. But there's something really compelling about the idea that if I've got a problem with a transaction, I can click on the transaction and click a button, and then I get my call up, and the person at the bank says, "Hello, Mr. Dunkley, you want to talk about such and such a transaction on such and such a date. What are your concerns?"
Yes.
Because at that point, and it's a double win, because for me, I don't get stuck in voice jail. Everybody hates the IVR. For the bank.
Right. And you don't have to spend 2 minutes authenticating yourself every time.
Yes. And for the bank, it actually makes their calls shorter, which might not seem much, but call centers will go to extreme levels to shave off 2 seconds here, 1 second there, because in aggregate across the entire day, that makes a huge difference to the amount of calls they can provide, and therefore reduces their cost. So even just using WebRTC for plain voice in those kind of environments could actually, in theory, simultaneously reduce the cost of operation and improve customer experience.
Absolutely.
So,
did you get to see Tim Panton's demo at TADHack, where he
told me about it, QR codes?
Yeah, he had everything in there: QR codes, embedded WebRTC, the whole shooting match. He even made use of a TruePhone SIM.
Wow, yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of slightly less obvious applications. So, this demo which we had, which incidentally, used the word engage, Michael. The demo is called Engage. That's kind of the message we're trying to get across here. But what else could you use it for? And what we in the UK call estate agents, I think you call them realtors in the US.
Yes.
So you're wanting to move to somewhere, and you can have a virtual real-time tour of the house, because you can't afford to fly from one end of the country to the other just to look at houses. You're going to do it, but when you're there, you need to look at your top 3, not your top 20. So you can have a real-time tour around the house, and you can say, okay, go out and hold up the iPad and show me the neighborhood. I want to make sure there's no car up on bricks in the neighbor's drive. all of this
Yeah,
kind of thing. It can change everything.
There's some history there and some precedent, because it was actually real estate agents, or as you say, estate agents, who in the early days of the web, there was an IBM toolkit for doing 3D virtual images. Back at our time when dial-up was still commonplace, you could get a sort of a clunky virtual pan-tilt zoom around the individual rooms in a listed house. And there were lots of little camera add-ons being sold for early digital cameras. So that's a wonderful idea. Another idea that I see is insurance companies. And they come from a position of already having large established call centers, substantial sales forces, but need to sort of do a value-added engagement to make sure that their customers are getting well matched to the services and products that they're buying.
Well, one of the examples I thought of is you're in a car crash. So why not call your insurance company? I don't know, has anybody been in a car crash and had to draw a picture of what happened? So you're in a car crash, you get your insurance company up and you stream everything to them and it gets recorded. And now they have a record of where all of the cars were at the time of the crash, there and then, on their server, taken at the time of the crash while the police are standing there. So they know that what they're seeing is actually the truth. Because anytime you get into one of these sort of traffic accidents, the instant thing that happens is, of course, nobody accepts blame, because accepting blame, you open yourself to liability, and you can't therefore expect people to accept blame. But it then comes down to the insurance companies threatening each other and trying to decide who's to blame. And often when it gets settled, the blame ends up being split 50-50 when it shouldn't be, or whereas actually something like this would give the ability to say, this is what happened at the scene. Now, if you're the guy who's responsible for the crash, that's probably not a service you want. But if you're the guy who wasn't, it would be a very valuable thing for you to have.
To be able to press a button and send the last 5 minutes captured instrumentation and video feeds from your car.
And WebRTC is the perfect way to do this, and arguably the WebRTC data channel is the perfect way to transfer that data, completely secure, between you and the insurer.
Yeah, and the exciting bit of that is you don't necessarily need the person to be pushing the buttons to be able to do that, because you could be using WebRTC from within the car, in an automatic fashion, I think.
Yeah, you could do.
Yeah, it's funny because while it's a little askew from the current Acision offering, one wonders whether we won't see the kind of dashboard telemetry and in-car cameras that the police officers have been using for quite some time, just in your average vehicle on the street.
Built into the car.
Instrumentation.
Yeah. Well, this is where the future gets interesting. With the convergence of WebRTC and Skynet.im.
Yes. Well, I'm looking at buying a new car, which is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, but that has front and rear-facing video cameras and a millimetric radar, which stops you from bumping into things.
I just bought an automobile last month, and it actually has 3 cameras. It has a pair of cameras pointing forward for the intelligent cruise control and collision avoidance, and then a camera pointing backward. And it's just a matter of connecting all this up to a carrier and using that data sensibly.
Yeah. I think I can one-up you there, because I've got on order a new Nissan Qashqai, and it's got 5 cameras, believe it or not, which stunned me. It's got a front-facing one behind the rear-view mirror, which actually reads road signs and traffic signs and relays them internally, and can very annoyingly tell you when you're speeding. It's got blind spot detection along the sides, which means that a light comes on when somebody's passing you, and if you turn the indicator or actually move the steering wheel in that direction while somebody's passing you, it starts to beep. But it's also, because it's got 4 cameras around the edge, with fisheye lenses, it means that when you're coming in to maneuver into a tight parking space, in the middle of the dashboard you get a bird's eye view of the car, and you can see how close you're getting to things when you're maneuvering in. And of course, all of those sensors and feeds would be perfect things to send in. Yes. The other big area is going to be online education. Oxford University has a Chinese department, and I don't mean a department teaching Chinese. I mean a remote education department to educate Chinese people who can't come to the UK. And this is going to become an increasing thing. And of course, WebRTC with conferencing, where actually you have one streamer to multiple participants, is with a messaging back channel, is very similar to what we do on the VUC almost. It's the perfect way to host lectures and proper conferences. It's the right way to host tutorial sessions.
Yes. And then you couple that with the recording capability, so you can rewind, you can go back, and if you didn't understand something the first time, you can play it again. Sam.
Well, this is one of the great things about WebRTC is you can have network recording, which is great for banks and anywhere that needs to do auditing or has legal requirements. But actually, one of the features is the media recording feature, which means that from your browser you can say record this stream to a file on my hard disk. Which, if you're doing those kind of lectures and stuff, building that into the app is actually an even better way of doing it.
Mm.
So the ideas, unfortunately, and these are all pretty mundane ideas because they're all things that are going on at the moment where we're just enhancing them a bit. But yet there's a compelling business case for a lot of them. So, as the technology, more people become aware of the technology, we're going to start to see really wild ideas, and we're going to start to see really new things we can't even guess at the moment.
Yeah, have you personally done anything with embedded HTML5 apps?
No.
Because we've been playing with them, and there's some really quite good ones. So, for example, we've got embedded into our JVB Prezi, the HTML5 presentation app, which was incredibly easy to drop in there, but gives you a very, very powerful way of presenting presentations, but through the web browser.
But I mean, again, that's kind of one level higher up than we're kind of working at the moment, because
indeed, that is something working with WebRTC, but through a framework. Yeah, you're right. It's one layer above, but what you get by plugging all these bits and pieces together is something that's truly amazing, and it's not that difficult to put together.
No, and I mean, this is the thing. There's very little that WebRTC is doing that you couldn't have done 5 years ago, but the barrier of entry was too high.
Indeed.
So,
yeah.
And of course, it is more secure. Security has been baked in from the beginning, which means it's more secure. But
tell me about.
We were calling them mashups before, where we were combining these disparate services together, and it's just getting easier and easier.
Exactly. So, but that, and back to sort of the Acision message is that effectively, you can take all of these different components and plug them together and make a really powerful app. We're looking to provide the messaging, the SMS, the presence, the voice and video part of that for people. So if you've got one of these ideas and you've got a business case, come and talk to us. We can help with that part of it.
All right. And having come up to 12:10 local time here, an hour and 10, I feel I've been educated. My cup runneth over, in fact. Thank you, gentlemen, and perhaps we should wind down the recording.
Yeah, we kept going for so long without Carl and no Randy. They'll be jealous.
I'm sure Randy will have something to say about that.
But it's so easy with somebody like Peter, a font of knowledge.
Oh, thank you.
Indeed. And so I'll draw this to a close. Thank you, everybody. We'll add the thank you to the sponsors to the audio recording after the fact. Thank you, gentlemen. And we'll stop broadcast and go to the adult section.